Is there anyone in here who's not in a group? Is everyone in here in a group? Yep. Okay, that's good. By my little calculation, looking at the group tool online, we've only got about 8 people who aren't in a group, so that's not too bad, and I'll have to try and round them up as we go forward. How many of you guys here are with someone who's in your group? Okay, that's pretty good. No worries. Because it's a workshop, so we're going to be doing some work. Have you got anyone coming from your group, or? No, okay. Let's see who turns up. If you're all by yourself, that's not going to be the end of the world. You can jump in and work with someone else for the sake of having a chat. But you might get saved in a couple of seconds. It's possible. So I wanted to return to this issue of business growth and just explore that a little bit more. And then I want to just sort of preview what you're going to be doing with your financials. I'm going to give you, how many of you guys have done stuff with financials before? 1, 2, 3, okay. So the good news is you're not going to have to create a lot. You're going to need to make some assumptions, but you're going to need to be able to justify your assumptions, all right? So in the next week or so, I will create for you a spreadsheet, which all you have to do is plug the numbers in, all right? It'll actually do everything for you, but you'll still need to justify what you put in it, all right? And I'll talk to you more about that as we go through, but the main thing when I say justify is don't pick an idea that you can't reach out and touch. All right. So you've got plenty of time to change your ideas, but if you're thinking of an idea that you can't use your social and capital to reach out and find people who can verify the nature of that context, then it's going to be hard for you to justify the numbers that you've got, because you're really just going to be guessing. All right. But if you say, well, I work in this industry, or I know people who are in this industry, and I've gone and spoken to them about this, that, and the other, and this seems to be industry averages, and so on, then that'll all work. Hey, how you doing? Good. But I'll talk more about that as we go through. There's nothing to fear, right? But the main thing is that we don't want to just pretend, all right? I gave you an old saying last week, so I'll give you another old saying this week. Maybe we'll just do that every week. I'll give you an old saying, because I like reading old books. But I really like this saying. I tend to find a way of writing it quite often, or quoting it quite often. It's easy to look at things and say, oh, it must be a really complicated business, and they must be improving, they must be getting better all the time. But a lot of times the things that survive only survive because they don't face the same problems that someone else faces, right? So if you think back to 227, we talked about the environment as having an ecological and a selective component. Hi guys. If you accept that's valid for your idea, then your idea might have a really complicated environment, and somebody who's got another idea might have a really, really simple environment, right? So the process of thinking about business growth in one context might actually be not that complicated, but in another it might be really complicated, okay? So rather than assuming that businesses that survive have done so because they must be just so great, I'll give you an example. A restaurant that I go to when I'm in Germany, because my mate really likes to go there, they only take, years ago it would just be cash, and I wouldn't always have cash. I'd have a credit card, but not always the local currency. Then they changed to having an EFTPOS machine, so I could actually buy that meal for my mate and his wife. And then the last time I was there, they don't have that anymore, right? Because it actually was costing them too much in bank fees, from their perspective, right? So businesses can actually evolve in a more complex way, and they can devolve and go back to being even more simple, right? It's not the assumption that everything has to improve constantly for it to survive. It just depends on their environment, right? So if the people are happy to pay cash, then they'll be fine. It's only be if everybody, that ecological environment was, no, we don't use cash anymore, we only actually have cards, well then it'd be a problem, but they don't need to go in that direction. So what I'm really trying to say is, When you hear everyone talking today, because you'll all be having a chat about your ideas and starting to share some of your thinking about where you're at, and don't worry if you're not actually anywhere yet, that's part of the process of actually trying to make sense of where you're at. You might hear people talking about a really complex sort of thing that they're working on, and you might be thinking, well, ours is pretty simple. But that's okay, all right? As long as you can justify either an increase in turnover, an increase in the scope of your operations, as long as you can make that justification, it'll be fine, all right? Some of you will have more complicated, when you're talking you'll be thinking, oh, ours seems just too simple, but I'm only assessing the process, all right? I'm not making a judgment on whether something's more complicated or not. I want you guys to have a chat amongst yourselves for a few minutes, and I want you to think about these things, all right? So when I was a kid growing up, we used to have a thing called Kodak moments. So nobody had a camera other than a Kodak. And there was no film out there other than Kodak. So everything was Kodak, right? Until there is no Kodak, right? But everything, if you type into Google, Kodak moment, that's what everyone would say, oh, that's a Kodak moment. And they'd take that picture, right? Because unlike these things, you were very careful about what you took a picture of 30, 40 years ago, because each picture cost you money, and you only had 12 or 24 pictures on a roll. So you could only take a picture, and you just didn't take pictures for the sake of taking pictures. And you then had to go and pay money, $10, $15 to get those photos back, all right? But then it just disappeared overnight, all right? When I was a young boy, you would be asked to hoover the carpet. No one was asked to clean the carpet, you were asked to hoover the carpet. If I'm in the Philippines, if I go to the Philippines now, people Colgate their teeth. You better go and Colgate your teeth, right? Because there's only really 2 brands over there, and Colgate most probably has 90% of the market. Do you want to guess why Colgate would have 90% of the market in the Philippines? Could be, but in fact I'm sure it is. Well, it could be Thailand, I'm not sure. There's quite a few Asian producers of toothpaste. Because Colgate's the only one who wants to make it into little sachets. Right? So if you're prepared to repackage your stuff in certain countries where the willingness to pay is very low, but people can afford a little sachet. So if you want to wash your hair in the Philippines, chances are it'll be a little sachet of Sunsilk. And Sunsilk has the market. Why? Because they have the sachets. Other people sell it by the big bottle, but not many people can actually afford the big bottle, right? Seems like a lot of money to spend just on hair. You could actually buy fish and feed the family. So I want you to think about that. Where did Hoover go? It's still there, right? But it doesn't dominate the vacuum cleaner world anymore. We started saying this. We only said it for a very short period of time. I'm going to go home and Betamax that, right? We only said it for like a year, but we started using this to say we were going to do it, if we were going to video something, right? So in let's call it 78, this was by far the most dominant form of using something. G'day. And then it just disappeared overnight. It was gone in like 2 years. So it went from being the most dominant to not existing. So I want you to think about how that might have been the case. And yet FedEx, which was an idea that was scoffed at by everybody, is still there. And we still say that. Can you FedEx that? Right? So we used to say, can you Betamax that? Can you Hoover that? Can you Kodak that? Right? So just have a chat amongst yourselves and see if you can work out where these things disappeared, or in the case of FedEx, why that might still be there. And we'll have a bit of a discussion in a minute or two. And if you can think of any brands that are verbs in your world, right, then let's put them on the table too, and let's contemplate where they might go to in a short space of time. Don't be shy, guys. Those guys up the back look friendly. So does he. Actually, he looks very friendly. Yeah, go up and have a chat with the guys at the back.
I had Wednesday off, which was opposite, and then pretty much to throw me out.
What do you guys think?
Oh, makes me feel old. Yeah, me too.
There's nothing wrong with being old.
But I don't think we use Hoover in Australia like we do in the UK. They still
No.
Hoover everywhere. And even if it's not a Hoover that new,
They still Hoover. Yeah, I'm sure people in the Philippines Colgate their teeth, but they're not using Colgate, right?
I mean, we obviously can't do that, but mine's not a doona.
No. But you're pretty successful when your brand becomes the verb, yeah, or the noun, or yeah.
So I think FedEx is still here because they keep reinventing themselves because they're very competitive and evolving.
Yep. What do they deliver a lot of now?
Yeah, online shopping.
And electronic documents as well, right? What did what did Kodak not do? They didn't become a digital anything. You know, the funny thing is, it's quite sad. When they really sort of shut up shop, the thing that they had, the asset they had that had the most value, was all of the unused patents that they had actually developed related to digitising things. That other companies came in and said, well, they've developed a process for this or for that. So they're actually, people were working on stuff, but they never got through to the front, and it never actually got used, right? Fuji was the one. Yeah, I think they're just that sort of, you get so big, you know, and you just think, oh, everyone will keep doing it. But Fuji came through from nothing, being a part-time nothing sort of filmmaker, and just swept through with digital cameras and stuff like that, and then everyone else came through. I remember when my dad went and bought a Kodak camera. He bought it because, you know, Kodak's a reliable brand, and I just said, Dad, it's like, it's two megapixels, everything else is 6, you know, it's so antiquated, right? So they just couldn't keep up. They were chasing their tail.
I remember my mum bought a camera that was just on the cusp of digital. And she said, I'm not going to buy one of those digital camera things. They'll never catch on. Never catch on. So she bought another film camera.
Yeah.
And about 6 months later, she went to the shop and bought a digital camera. She doesn't feel like themselves.
But even if you think about that and, say, vinyl records, there's still a market there, right? If you can be at the right time. Yeah? Yeah, yeah. 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 I think the whole idea of being able to develop your own, you know, you can muck around with a filter on your phone, but really that's just cheating. You know, oh, that makes me look a bit better, you know, as opposed to, I think I'm going to, you know.
I think being forced to think about how you're going to take the photo and take that time to do that, like that's not something my generation have to do, so it's more exciting for them
Rather than taking 50 and deleting 48 of them.
Yeah.
so seriously now.
How about you guys? What do you think? Where did all these things disappear? Oh yeah, shocking. I'm not sure I was hard on you. I think you were hard on yourself. Is someone doing 227 tomorrow? Oh yeah, you're fired up.
Oh yeah, I'm keen. I've got that open mind.
That's it. That's what you need, open mind, don't you?
Don't just give Tyler $0.
Why? I already heard about it.
You know what
My
I did?
friend actually got my stuff.
Did she?
Last year's message too. And I had like 2 girls like $2.
Yeah. The odds are there's 350. There'll be about 320, 300, and let's say 310.
I ran on Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he give you any? So, guys, what do we think? What are we thinking, guys? These guys had more growth opportunities sitting in front of them than most companies, right? So what happened to them? What do you think happened to Kodak? They went the way of the dodo, but what would we say? How does that happen to a company?
They just didn't forecast it, they didn't plan for it.
Yep.
I guess they didn't have like the technologies that they kept up with, so they really got to do R&D with research and development.
Yeah, no, they had heaps. Yeah. When they were dismantled and sort of pulled apart, the most things that they had in terms of asset was all the unused patents. So that they had patents for all sorts of digital applications that other companies came in. Apple came in, Samsung came in and said, oh, fantastic, they've got a patent on this and a patent on that. So they actually had all this amazing stuff that they'd been thinking about, but none of it actually got out the front.
They didn't execute
They were just...
Adding themselves to the back to like worry about,
it.
when
Too confident.
There's most probably, I reckon, there's 100 reasons you could say why it all occurred, but I reckon that's at the heart of a lot of it, right? They just assumed we're this big, people will catch up, right?
in the same such way as not being a similar thing, right? They kind of phase out. They were at the top of their game and then how to retain a similar process.
Yeah.
Kind of nothing bought out with those.
Can you guys remember when the first iPhone came along? Because we started playing around with the iPod and thinking how easy and cool that was, right? To actually be able to control music like that, So going from a iDiscman, right, or the Walkman with the tape, to then the Discman, and then the Shock one, the one that you could sort of run with without it jumping. And then the iPod was just so revolutionary. It was almost like, that's just ridiculous. How could you have 1,000 songs on that? Or 2,000 or whatever the small one was. And then on and on it went. But when the phone came out, for a lot of people, assuming the cost wasn't an issue, Nokia phones were just, who would even look at it? Right? Because this is just so much fun, being able to do like that on a phone. Right? And they never really caught up, did they? They just got bang, gone. What about this one here, the Hoover? So that's pretty much, if you had a vacuum cleaner, although as you were saying, a lot of people, as more vacuum cleaners come into the market, people still say go and Hoover that, even though they were using an Electrolux or a different brand type thing. How much does a vacuum cleaner cost now?
Yeah, they reminded me of the Holden cars. But then when industry started producing things on mass, they were just...
But how much does a vacuum cleaner cost you now? Well,
Get one for $89
could we get one for less than 89?
Yeah, for sure.
39, 49? Yeah, if we're not too worried about how long it's going to last for and all that sort of stuff. I mean, if I've got one like me, you don't have to worry about how long it's going to last for because I never used it. So it only has to really go 3 times. When you move in, when you're proud of it, and maybe when you leave the joint. But we used to have people selling these things. They come and knock on your door, right? The vacuum cleaner salesman, right? So these things used to have their own distribution network, which meant that people had skin in the game, right? It was someone's livelihood to make sure that one of these things was going into your house. Now that's not really anyone's livelihood, because if I walk into, what's the vacuum cleaner shop? Godfrey's. Well, they've got a million brands, right? So they actually don't care which one you buy, other than obviously they might make more money out of one than the other, right? But they're just happy if you buy something, right? What about these guys? These guys are really interesting because this is almost what happened to Apple. So Apple almost went this way too. So does anyone know why Betamax just disappeared? Best technology in the world, and everyone had it. So if you walked into a video shop in 1980, everything was Betamax. But if you walked in 1983, there was a couple of little Betamaxes over in that corner, but everything else was VHS. So how did they go from being everything to nothing and then totally nothing? And Sony, so it's not like it's a shitty little company. It's one of the biggest companies in the world.
Is there just new technology and it was cheaper?
To start with, the VHS was pretty much the same price. What do you think? But when these guys came out, they said, we want to own it. So the only person that can make Betamax is Sony. So just think about Apple here and PCs, right? So the only person who can make this is Sony. But the VHS was instantly licensed to everybody, right? So Panasonic could make VHS, JVC could make it, Sharp could make it, every electronics manufacturer there could make it. So what do you reckon is going to happen if I've got 20 manufacturers making VHS tape recorders and I've only got Betamax over here? What's the difference?
So VHS like just a process of open innovation. So every company made it better.
Yeah, they all made it better, right? I'm going to make my slow motion better than yours. I'm going to make a timer so you can actually go away for the weekend and actually still... With the first machines, you just put it in and press play. That's it. There was nothing else on them. There was no clock. There was no anything, right? And then these innovations just kept coming, right? As the innovations come in, we're going, why would I want to buy the Betamax? It's big, it's heavy, it looks like a piece of TV recording material compared to this leak getting smaller, because Japanese make everything get smaller, right? More features, but get smaller. Now if you want a DVD, well, you most probably, it's must be twice the size of the actual cassette tape, you know, it's must be going to be that small. So the same thing almost happened to Apple. All right? Apple said there's only one company in the world that can make an Apple, and that's Apple. And IBM said anyone can make a PC. All right? So you got all of the innovation happening over there, and Apple was for graphic designers or musicians. It was really for really niche people. So what changed it? Why do we all have Apples now? How many of you guys have got an Apple? Put your hand up if you've got an Apple laptop. So 20 years ago, that wasn't the case at all. You might have one person who was a freak. Right, the weirdo, right? So what changed it? So the iPod changed it. So we all became just standard users, right? They solved a problem for us. How to move around and have music in your head, which Sony had nearly solved, but was still not quite work, you know. It was clumsy, right? It looked good in the video, but it really didn't look good when you tried to do it yourself, right? FedEx, on the other hand, started sending letters, then it started sending boxes, and we FedEx everything. But what do they send these days as well? They send lots of electronic stuff, right? They're experts in sending electronic materials, right? So they adapted, they've stayed in the game, but their ecological environment for these guys is good. What's the difference between Australia Post 15 years ago and now, do you think? The ratio of letters to parcels 15 years ago, the ratio of letters to parcels today, what do you reckon the difference is? Have a guess. I mean, 90% of their money from letters 15 years ago and 10% from parcels, and now it's the opposite. And it's good for them because they own, it's a part of the network, right? It's like Telstra. If you own the parts of the network, it's hard for someone to come in and outcompete you, right? So what I want you guys to do, and I'm assuming that you've got a bit of the starting point for an idea. I'm going to walk around and have a chat to you guys while you're doing it. And if you're just here by yourself, that's all right. We can still have that conversation. But what I want you to think about is all of this and being able to make sense of it. We can do all this retrospectively, right? If you were there at the time, this is like, have you heard of the parable of the boiled frog? Is anyone familiar with the parable of the boiled frog?
Boiled frog.
Boiled frog. So if you have a frog, so the story goes, if you have a frog in a fry pan and you slowly increase the heat, by the time the frog gets to the point where it says, I've got to get out of here, its legs have already cooked. They're paralysed from that. You know, they're cooked like if you were cooking something. So he can't get out. But if you just put the frog into the boiling water, it would jump straight out. Right? So a lot of the time when this happens, it seems obvious after the event, but you don't see it coming. Right? It's like getting old. Right? You think you're still young, but then you sort of realise you're not. You will find out, don't worry. You'll find out. So the biggest challenge with this is that we don't, and we're not aware of our environments, right? So that was sort of like the key learning that I hope that you guys took from 227, was that if you want to go off and do something, one, you've got to have the conviction to go and do it, but you've got to have that perception of the environment. If what you're thinking of is wrong, well then it's just going to not work out, right? So I want you guys to think, why do firms or entities fail in your idea space? You've got an idea that you're thinking about. So I want you to give some thought now, and I'm going to wander around you all while we're doing it. I want you to think about, why do you think things fail, right? Because you're about to put together a plan for a lot of success, to go from this to 5 to 10 times bigger. You're planning to succeed, big time, right? So if you're going to go in that direction, you better make sure you understand why things fail, right? Because if you don't understand why things fail in that space, that's the first stop, right? That's the first bit of homework that needs to get done, because otherwise you could be just carrying on business as usual, thinking that you're doing something, but only to find out it isn't going to work, all right? And some of your ideas, the actual relative environment is much, much simpler than others, right? And more forgiving too, right? Some environments, when you make the mistake, it's good night nurse, right? Others, okay, we can learn from that, and let's have another crack at it, all right? So I'm going to come around, start having that conversation, and I'll come around and see if I can prime you guys as we go. How you guys getting on? Yeah. And by the way, guys, don't panic about your slide. If it comes in on Saturday or Sunday or Monday, it's not going to worry me. Okay? Just in case anyone's thinking they've got to go home and stress and about a slide, it's not the end of the world. Well, you... Yeah, I don't want to see you guys stressed. If I'm not going to mark it tonight. So yeah. What sort of idea area you think you guys are in?
We actually haven't thought about it too much yet.
To me, passions. What are you guys interested in?
Interests pretty much just like starting a business one day, maybe that's like interesting. Like we enjoy like
Okay.
and cars as well. I was thinking about doing that, looking at car companies because I know
Yeah. Did they? Right. They might should be coming back with the same thing but different brand and different features. Like I think, yeah, I sat in one of them, the Great Wall ones, a couple of years ago, and I thought this is sort of where Hyundai was to start with. It's so basic that people sort of say it's too basic. So then they just sex it up, put some more airbags in so they can claim it's safer, and then bring it back, and you know. You don't know what people's willingness to pay is until you put something in the market, and then you just improve it. Yeah. But I think Kia and Hyundai were there 15 years ago, and now they're fine. So
the price so low, people's just shooting the shit out.
Yeah. You get away with that in India because there's a market for really cheap stuff over there. Like there's $2,000 cars over there now that you can only just fit 2 little people in them, but it's still a car, you know. So your aspirations up here, if I own a car, it's functional, you can get down the market. But I think they're just made of plastic. So yeah.
And in Australia, it's kind of like something's turned into Detroit usually is.
So try to work out what you want it to be. Think about your social capital. So do you play in a band?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Business thing like that.
Yeah. So you can either, what does his business do? Sorry?
Packages honey.
Packages honey, okay, cool. So, you know, and if you want, there's no reason why you can't use that. Right? Because to do well on the project, you really need to be able to convince me that you've been able to reach out and really touch the reality of it. So when you sort of say, well, what are the average costs in this market? And you say, let me pull that out of my ass. Yeah, it's about that. Versus, my dad's been in this business for 10 years and blah, 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 right? So everything you've got is very believable. You still got to go through the process of trying to work out, okay, so from your dad's perspective, he might say, I don't actually want to be 5 or 10 times bigger, right? I'm actually comfortable doing this, right? Because maybe you'd have to buy in honey from other people, because, I mean, you can only have so many bees and whatnot, right? But that could be a pretty good context for you. Yeah. In a perfect world, you've got something that's cool, and you've got access to it. If you do something that's cool, but you have no access to it, it's cool, but it could sink. It's a matter of, okay, can we? We've got good access to this. Can we get that one to go far enough distance for us to sort of stay interested in it and whatnot? Yeah. And the cool thing about that is that, you know, your dad might have zero interest in wanting to expand out, but he might actually be curious about what it would look like if you were to contemplate it. Yeah. So that could make for a good one. Yeah. Buzzer group. You're in a group. You're a separate one. Separate one. All right. So do you think you've? I just tripped this up. Oh, seems to be. Do you think you've got a context that's workable for you at the moment? It's that. Yeah, I think it's that. Yeah. So what are you guys interested in? Do you have a joint interest? Put it that way. Oh, yeah. Because she's in your group, the girl's in your group. There was a girl that was here. She's in the row, okay. Do you have access to a florist? Yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, and what about your group? What were you guys thinking?
We're doing a gardening company. They have, they like
Okay. Yep. 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 Absolutely. Okay. Do you have any access to that space?
Yeah, one of the girls in my group is friends of mine.
Ah, cool. No worries. How about you? Yep. Yep. So do you know anyone in that space? Okay. Cool. Cool. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, that's the thing. When you're making your case to me in your report, I'm just going to, every time you make an assumption or a statement, I'm waiting to see a little number after it, and I'll go to the back, and you're going to tell me where that assumption's connected to. I just made that up. Versus, actually, we spoke to that person who helped us. So the more believable your report is, so there's that confidence base that we have in it, and then secondly, does that then have a logical connection to the strategies and other ideas that you've run with? All right. So rather than me just saying, oh, theoretically it sounds okay, we want to go beyond that. That's the challenge for you, is to be able to sort of make that connection. So that's why it's important, even if you don't choose for another week, that's why it's important to try and get the right context. Your context will be fine if you've got access to that. And so in yours, it might not necessarily be about a turnover issue, about we want to go from being a $100,000 to a $500,000. It might be, how many people can we actually help, right? How many people with disability or autism or whatever the case may be, depression, can we get into this service? And does that mean it's all lawn mowing and gardening, or do we got to go into house cleaning and other services as well?
Yeah, one of the other issues she was talking about was like the owner wants to grow the business, but it's just him that it needs to find how do you grow a business for the owner as well? How do they do that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a hard one, right? Because you're a baby. Right? A lot of businesses don't grow. It's a bit like saying, I've got 3 kids, right? I'd love to, and actually I would love to have more kids. My wife would. I don't want to have any more kids. My wife would love more kids, but I like having kids because I like naming them. My kids have all got weird names, right? So I'd love to think up some more, and they're all made up names. So you can Google my kids' names and you won't find them anywhere other than them, right? So I'd like to make up some more names, but I don't want to have any more kids to do it. Maybe I should have a business. If you can't think of a name, I'll come up with a name for you. So you don't have to have, shouldn't say a name, should I? Because maybe you've been to a class and you've had 6 of the other people with your name. So yeah, but that's the main thing. Make sure you've got ability to connect to it. Okay? All right. But yours, that'll work well. How about you guys? Context, what are we thinking? Your idea. Yeah. Yep. Ah, yes. Yeah. So why do you think restaurants fail? Yeah. Yep. 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 Okay. Sounds like you've got a good handle on why these things could fail, all right? And of course, the flip side of that, when we get to it, is so how could you actually grow something and not fall trap of those challenges? Because you don't tend to see a restaurant that becomes 10 times the size, all right? That's pretty rare. Having said that, of course, you can franchise a restaurant and have multiple locations and increase the turnover that way, right? Yeah. All right, good. How you guys getting on? You all by yourself?
Yes, the beer group has ditched me.
They've ditched you. Yeah. Do you think they've gone to the bar or?
I know the wine is only looking about
Yeah, okay. All right. Doing some research. Doing research. Yeah, cool. And are you in a group?
Yes.
Are they not here? No, okay. Nice.
They're like, it's too far away for us to come in, so we're not going to run it.
Okay. So, do you know what's your focus area? Do you know? Have you got a context?
Hello. What does this do?
Okay. Yeah. So if you need to have a chat, just let me know and I can drop a line and have a chat if you're unsure. Yeah.
Hello.
Yep. You'll be right. But don't panic. Do it over the weekend or even Monday. Yeah. How about you guys? What was your focus area? That's right. Yep. Yep. Why do you think they failed?
There's a few reasons why I reckon.
There's competition.
I think it's just about the know-how, keeping up with the customer demand as well. I feel like the customer demand is definitely there. It's a huge customer demand. And just being able to be available, readily available to go through and actually have enough staffing hours you can actually go and do that sort of thing.
So if you think about, I mean, IT people sell things, right? But they also provide service, yeah? So it's much easier to sell things if you're solving a problem, right? Rather than the customer has to work out the problem for themselves. That's what I need. I need that UX 250. I'll go and buy that. I reckon IT companies fail because they're not good at being front and centre to solving people's problems. If you're always in the mix of conversations and you always know that people are having a problem or their productivity or they can't achieve something, so an IT company would grow because it's helping other companies grow. So if you find that symbiotic coaction, that would be the best way. Not because you got Apple. Apple doesn't give a shit if you read the time or not, right? But they know that you want their watch, so you buy the watch, right? But they don't really care if you read the time, right? They just want you to buy the watch, right? So an IT company can't say, well, we've got something here that you want to buy, so we're just going to be here. You've actually got to solve a problem. You've got to be able to say, well, if you use this and use that, or you change this and did that, that'd be good. So thinking about how you solve people's problems is going to be pretty central to this process, I reckon. Yeah?
Yeah, it's definitely.
So think about the problems that are out there to be solved, right? When the Y2K bug came around, and you guys remember that? Yeah, so 1999, everyone was saying they're all going to blow up. You know, once the clock hits 2000, it won't be able to explain it, and it'll all just... Now, I don't know if that could have ever happened. And people say, we put a patch on it. But, you know, for a lot of computers, there was no patch, and they still survive without any problems. You know, a little old 386 that's just sort of sitting there doing nothing, and no one got to it, but it still survived, didn't it? So, okay, who we got down here? Oh, sorry. How are you guys getting on? What are you thinking? Yeah. So what was your areas of interest?
Technology, health, things like that.
Yeah, okay.
Probably do a bit from a resource profile that I have.
Yeah.
And with manufacturing technologies and stuff, because that's the space that I deal with.
Yeah. So the main thing is whatever you choose, make sure you're not far away. You can reach out, whether it's a friend or an acquaintance, someone you know you can reach out and talk to. All right. And I'll explain that as we go through later this afternoon. Very important that you're not just going to come down to, we think that would be the right strategy or the right way to go. Because I don't doubt that you can make the case that a theory here or a theory there should be used, but what I want to be able to go is when you make that statement, a little piece of reference, I go to the back and your notes tell me we spoke to someone who helped us to understand this or did that, right? So whatever your idea is, make sure it's an idea you can connect to the context of. Yeah? Yeah?
So broadly, ideas say you've already got an existing space that differentiates
Yep.
various things. Talking about improving the capacity of that workspace. I guess by justifying the things that you can produce.
Yep.
Decent track there.
Yeah, the main thing is you've got to have a starting point. So you're going to imagine a company that you've got, if it's not based on an actual one. So you've got to have that as a starting point. You're established, and then what does it look like? So that's the main challenge for you. Yeah. Hang on a sec. Yes, mate. Yeah, I know. I saw that. Yeah, I'll talk to you soon, though, mate. I'm in class. All right. I'm not sure that makes your job much easier. Anyway, no worries, mate. Cheers. Bye. How about you guys? Are we still in that sort of social enterprise space?
We're trying to sort of understand.
Yep. Is it too many for you, do you think, or not?
Possibly too many, but never really get to leave one before we get the problem.
Yep.
So just deciding on the idea that everyone's comfortable with, especially when it comes to like ethical, social side of things, you sort of want everyone to be agreeing with the social side of it.
Yeah, I don't think you want to compromise too much. And if you get to the point where you think it's, well, actually it's 3 people in this group and maybe you go that way, then, you know, be comfortable in doing that, because ultimately I'm going to assess whatever you hand in, I'm going to assess it based on how believable I think it is. So the more compromises you make now and push yourself a little bit further away to try and fit this and fit that in, the more I'm going to read it. So when you say this, if that's a statement, you know, we think this, then I would expect to see a little one there. And then in the references, there'd be something that's one there, and then there's your, we spoke to Bob, and Bob said blah, blah, blah. So staying on song in terms of what's interesting for you, but you can just reach out and touch it. So I wouldn't compromise the reach. If we have this, we dilute that, which is going to feed into that bit, right?
So we're just doing like, if we were to map it up, I didn't really realise that we can sort of map up another business based on their growth. Like,
Sure.
To what degree, like, how flexible are we able to sort of like, because they may not tell, if we go to them and we ask them information, or they really want us some information, filling in the gaps, is that up to us, or is that...
Yeah, you might not be able to get the perfect starting point. Let's say you've got a social enterprise out there and you're able to get a pretty good estimate. You say, we think that their turnover is about $300,000. And we think that they're able to provide this service and that service to this many people, you know, in general terms, or to these locations, right? So we're going to work on the basis that that's our starting point. And so we're talking about 5 to 10 times that size. And that's the challenge for you. So as long as it's realistic, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It just needs to be realistic. Yeah. The financials I'm going to give you are only really, it's a bit like, I'm going to ask you to put on 5 more sets of clothes. So you're wearing a set of clothes now. I'm just making this analogy up as we go. I haven't got there yet, hang on. Right. So you still need to put them on in the right way. So you put them on like you've got one set of clothes on. So if you don't put the underwear on before you then put the next set of jeans on, it's going to look all over the place. And so the financials will line up. It'll all make sense as you're going your way through. It'll have these big holes in the middle of, say, the cash flow statement. If you've said, oh, yeah, we're going to go from here to here, but we won't actually hire any new people until we get to there. All right, so you're going to have to think about, okay, if we were going to grow, so once that expenditure's coming out of there, oh boy, we've got no income coming in here. So that's the challenging bit, trying to actually make that all fit together. And it'll throw up little red flags. If I can make the spreadsheet the way I want it, it'll just keep throwing up red flags for you. Otherwise it might be more.
Assignments of brief. When does it come out?
Yeah. So I've got half of the brief for you here today, but it's got to be signed off by someone at the school, and they've gone away on a boat. So I was supposed to, they've got it, and it'll be fine. So early next week, it'll get posted online. But I've got the half of it, which tells you what you're doing, the actual CRAs for each one of those. That's just got to be signed off by someone upstairs. So, yeah. But I'll show you exactly, specifically what you're going to do.
All we want is to go over as well.
Yeah.
Before we go getting excited about something.
Yeah. But if you find yourself in that situation, you can just simply say, look, the way Cole's saying this, we know he's a hard ass. But when you look at how I'm going to assess it, that connection and the validity of your statement, I'm happy for you to say anything you want, as long as it can be supported. I'm not going to overly question you unless there's no support for it. And then I've got to use my judgment. Does that sort of make sense? You know, I'm happy for you. A lot of things don't make sense, right? But if you've got someone saying, oh, that's what we do here and that's not how we do it, then I'll go with that, right? I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on all of these different contexts. Yeah. All right. Is she behaving herself or not? Did Paul go to Chicago? No. Right. Yeah. I'm just getting emails from everyone who's coming back from the Academy of Management. Yeah. How are you guys doing? What do you think? What's your context? Have you got a context? Yeah.
About social enterprise.
Yep. Doing what, do you think?
We throw around ideas about sustainable fashion.
Yep.
But we haven't really gone too much further.
Yeah.
Are we creating a totally new business, or is it
Yep.
take business that's already established?
Yeah, either or. You just needs to have a realistic starting point. So I don't want you to tell me that you're going to start a company that currently turns over $1,000. Just to get to 5, it's not going to be a thing. So yeah, just work through what you think is a reasonable starting point. But it's not a startup phase that you're in. If you're choosing it, you're established. So you're already in the market. You've got a customer base, and yeah, so you've got employees and costs and things like that. So.
Just being realistic.
Yeah. Because ultimately, and then the challenge for you is making sure. Do you know you got any friends in that industry, in that space?
One of my friends is like really sustainable stuff, and then
Yep.
I was like, yeah, like he'd go in high school, like I did an assignment on a business that's using sustainable fashion.
Yep. So you want to find some people in the industry, right, who can give you a bit of a sense. So there's just general business logistics that you'd be talking about that wouldn't matter if it was fashion or it was something else, that'd be fine. But then there would be some things that would be specific to fashion that you would want to be able to get a little bit of a handle on as well. Yeah. But the challenge is find something you're interested in. Right, that'll make this semester much easier. And then secondly, but you can still reach out and touch it. Yeah. Cool. How are you getting on? The rest of your group has disappeared. Okay. What's your focus area? Do you know? Yep. Yep. Okay. Do they know many people in that industry? Yeah. You don't need to know a million. You just, as long as you've got people who've got their handle on the sort of costs that you'd face in trying to do things in that space, right? That's the important thing. Yeah, okay. Let's see if we can by next week. Let's see if we can get them to nail it down. I'll talk about it today. You want a starting point where you sort of say that's where we're starting. It's a $100,000 turnover business. It's a whatever it's going to be. Yeah, no. The assumption is it's up and going. Yeah, we're sort of going to try and bypass the startup phase, and you're now a going concern, right? You're not about to fall over, right? So you can just make those assumptions. How about you guys? Have we got a context? Anyone that you would like to use? You only need to know. Oh, you can create the business yourself. You can make a context yourself. It just needs to be realistic. Yeah. So I'm giving you half the task sheet today. It's just got to be signed off by the folks upstairs. So it's done. I've done what I think is done, but I can't put it on Blackboard until it goes through the last QA process. And the people who do that are all away. They went away with Eka, and then they took the 2 days off. So yeah, unfortunately I gave it to them, but. Yep. Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah. We'll get there in a minute. Don't worry. You'll see it all. You can create a context. You can say, right, we are imagining ourselves as an established business. It's got to be established, right? And we're a business that turns over $200,000, and we perform this service. Or do you know what industry area? Fitness, okay. Yep, so you could be a gym, you could be a mobile service, you could be a range of different things. You just need to be able to get your hands into that space and think, okay, what would be the typical cost if it's a gym, what does rent cost per square metre, how big are rent gyms normally, and so you've got a general idea of staff, how many staff would you have, is it a 24-hour no staff type thing, is it a... You won't do a business plan, yeah, you're doing a report, yeah, for growth, and you'd only be comparing in terms of you need to have some accurate estimates for your costs. Yeah. No. As long as you've got a starting point which is logical, and then the challenge is, okay, how would you see this thing getting 5 to 10 times bigger? All right. That's the challenge. All right. So, hang on a sec. How are you getting on?
Sorry.
You're up. Yeah.
So, we're thinking of the lawnmowing business.
Yep.
We talked about it a bit down there.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm not actually sure if we're locked on with that or not. Because I was quite interested in doing my dad's business as well.
Yep.
He's currently a screen printer, so he does like t-shirts, like stickers and signs and all that.
Yep.
So he's currently got like one kind of factory kind of thing, and he's just like.
That would be a good context to do. You'd be able to sort of talk in general terms about how big the business is, the type of costs you face, and then you can get really good. I won't say you'll get a better mark because it all depends on other things, but you'll increase your probability of getting a good grade by having honest and realistic market info that you're actually using to build the story with. If you're making it all up, then it's like, we think this and we think that. It's like, I spoke to this person and they said this and that.
I was kind of having a conversation with Luke's the guy who runs the thing, and it's kind of hard to, like you were saying the other day, it's kind of hard to expand the online business, I suppose. It's like, it's kind of local, like dominating.
Yeah. You need to bring more people on. So it's more trailer, more people, more mowers.
And as soon as you've got to drive further away,
you're
almost losing money because you have to. So it's kind of hard to
The screen printing would be good. That's a good especially given that you've got that access to it.
I was just thinking that, do you think that it'd be hard to actually expand that kind of thing in a modern day though? Because he does it in an old school way of, I don't know how much you know, like he gets the print and gets the paint. He does it that way. I know there's more modern ways of doing it.
So what you need to think about is the energy that he can tap into. Right?
So like some people might prefer like the old school way.
So imagine that he does 100 print. I'll show you something in a second, right? I'll show it up here so the guys can actually see it, yeah? What was your name again, sorry?
Jake.
Jake, yeah. How about you guys? Are you guys going okay?
Yeah, we've come upstairs.
Yeah. Locked in on anything?
Well, you know how I emailed you about using Apprentice Investment
Yep.
Forward,
Yep.
and we were talking about some growth strategies
Yep.
with that, and Julie really liked kids and sport, and maybe we could tap into the Indigenous sporting side.
Absolutely.
Things.
Plenty of energy there.
Yes, absolutely, and so maybe start with sporting stocks and then maybe sporting equipment. Can you tell me about your wonderful idea for a system?
Oh, yeah, so we were talking about, we were talking about, why firms fail and some stuff. We were saying we could set up some sort of arrangement whereby we have sporting clubs down here in metro areas. Sort of coupled up, we'll have a sister club arrangement. A sporting club for Indigenous kids.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, because clubs have a community culture, so yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. Yep, sorry. Yep. More think about yourself as a learner, right? So what are the challenges you have, right? Maybe you sort of find it hard to be interested, or you're sceptical, or you're whatever, right? So think about those things that you see as weaknesses for you in general terms when you come into being a class. No, you're more general. Yeah, cool. Guys, had a really interesting question from Jake at the back. So he might look at doing something that relates to screen printing, right? So screen printing is one of those things. It's a very manual process. So it's hard to sort of imagine if you're already established, how do you 5 to 10 times that, right? Without having to, buy more equipment and all that sort of stuff, right? So think about Emergy at every step of the way here, right? Because the Emergy is always going to be the easiest way forward, right? Always. So many years ago, I was at a conference in somewhere, Holland, and begins with G. Doesn't begin with M. Maastricht. And this guy came over and had lunch with me. And he just heard me ordering my meal, and he said, "Are you Australian?" He was a local artist in Holland. And I said, "Yeah." And he said he had fond memories of coming to Australia in the 1970s. Could he sit down and have a meal? Sure. Anyway, over the next 4 or 5 hours, he told me his life story, which was unbelievably fascinating. And he was an artist who went to art school in one of the biggest cities in Holland, and he was pretty bored by it. So he learned how to be an artist, but he was quite bored by portraitures and landscapes, and he became the world's first sports artist, right? So there were no sports artists in the world. This is in the late 60s. His name's Rene Brunet. So you can look him up, Rene, R-E-N-E, then B-R-O, Brunet. You'll find him if you just type in sports artist. And so what he would do is he would go along to Jack Nicholson or some car racing person or a soccer player, and he would say, "Tell you what, I'll do a life portraiture of you," and who doesn't have an ego, especially if you're a famous sports person, and then I'll run off prints, 200 prints. You sign them from one of 200, 2 of 200, and we go halves in the sale of these prints. So there's not a sportsman on the planet that he hasn't painted. There's not a sportsman, right? Anyone who's famous, he's painted them, right? He's the world's most famous sports artist, and he's just using their imagery that surrounds their fame. Everyone would love to have this print, and every artist would say yes because they want the life-size portraiture. A little bit, sometimes they are. Like there's one of my favourite ones is a baseballer, and all you can really see is the baseballer from behind and the baseballer's number. And so the face is sort of hidden from here. So it's like, you wouldn't say it's really accurate art, but then other stuff is... But anyway, he got rung up in 1977, a phone call from Australia. So he's a struggling artist, and there's this phone call, and he picks it up, and he's like, "Hello." So in 1977, you didn't get phone calls from the other side of the world very often. And it's like, "Is that Rene Brunet?" "Yes, Rene Brunet." Yes. "I need you to come to Australia." "Oh, I'm busy here." "I need you to come to Australia now." And it was Kerry Packer giving him $150,000 to come and paint all of the World Series cricketers. Right, the Australians, the West Indies, and the rest of the world. And that was his break. That made him famous. He was the only sports artist who was listed as a sports artist in however you'd list them. So he was lucky because he was the first one, and then Kerry Packer helped put him on the map. 150 grand in 1977 was a huge sale. It'd be like getting $800,000 or $900,000 today, right? And now he has galleries all around the world, and his stuff's pretty cool. So your dad, Jake, could think not about the increased volume that he does. He could think about who he's putting on these sign printing things, right? And he could be tapping into the image attached to a whole range of things that people want to have on a T-shirt, and maybe that T-shirt's actually got someone's signature on it, right? And maybe some of them, maybe they're limited edition, right? Because he only wants to do this one-off stuff, but he wants to get a much higher price for them, right? So think about that sort of stuff, right? You don't always have to think about the growth being just straight sales, units of sales. It might be you're going to change the actual amount of money per unit cost. So rather than someone's going to buy a t-shirt for $25, they're going to buy them for $200, all right? Because there's something really unique. They're one of 50, all right? One of 50 t-shirts, and that'd be pretty, and because you can sell that anywhere around the world, yeah? Okay, so that's the first step for you, is starting to think about, some of you have settled in on your idea space, and I think you're generally in the right areas. And if you haven't, what I've said pretty much to all of you is I'll be assessing it, as you'll see shortly as we go through here, I'll be assessing it more favourably to the extent that I believe it. Right? So I'm not starting from a position of being a skeptic and not believing you, but you're going to give me your logic, theoretically, and I want the logic to be supported by the fact that you've been able to talk to people in that industry. So err on the side of making sure you can tap in and get plenty of information. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why these things fail, right? So you're going from assumption that you've got something that's not just started, it exists, all right? So we're not talking about a startup phase that we're going to move away from. You've got something that already exists. It's established, okay? And you're going to give me that starting point. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. You start your business for the wrong reasons. You're doing your motivation is not there, right? At some point, we want to have. I'm reading this book at the moment called The Denial of Deaf. Has anyone read that? It's a pretty cool book if you're interested in deaf. But this guy, who sadly he only wrote the book just before he died, right? So then in the version I've got, which came out 10 years later with a different foreword, this guy went and interviewed him as he was dying, the day before he died. And he says, it's pretty weird because I've given this great explanation of what it means to die, and now I'm dying. I actually have to be true to what I've just said, right? But one of the things he talks about in there is immortality projects. That as humans, we would all love to think that something lives on, right? For a lot of people, business is a bit like that. You know, I don't work for somebody, I'm doing something because I want to actually make this contribution, right? Well, people change their mind about what that contribution is, right? So if you start a business and it's actually not something that really motivates you, that's an easy way to fail in business, right? Because your mind will go somewhere else, right? Poor management, I think we talked about that when we were up talking about the restaurants, right? If you're making bad decisions, poor management can come down to can cover a lot of different things, but for me, the worst form of poor management is bad perception, right? And if you throw pride into that, that's even worse. So if you know you're wrong and other people know you're wrong but you don't have the ability to just accept it, then that's even worse, right? Because not only are you making a wrong decision, but you're too stubborn to actually accept that, you know, you could actually change course. Insufficient capital, that's going to be the big problem for you all, right? And so I'm going to keep challenging you on this one, is to grow a business, the hardest thing about growing a business is you've got to feed it, right? It's going to need more people. It's going to need more machinery. It's going to need more stock. It's going to need a lot more of something, which means you're going to have money. Now, if you're here and you're trying to get to there, it doesn't just go like this. You get more money and you have more expenses. The expenses will go like this and the money might come in like that. So how you're going to grow the business, and the spreadsheet I'm going to give you will require you to give me all of this data on a 3-monthly basis over a 36-month period, right? Now, I don't mind if you genuinely think you can make the case that this only will take 2 years, this growth, but I think for most people 3 years is a more realistic thing, all right? So you'll have red ink in your cash flow area if you've got more money going out than coming in. That's okay for one, but you're doing this reporting every 3 months. So if you've got 2 months of red ink, that means you've got 6 months of red ink. So should businesses be in the red for 6 months? What's the word for that? Insolvent, right? You're not supposed to be trading if you're insolvent, right? You're supposed to have the money that you need to pay your bills, all right? So for many businesses, that might be a case that the bank manager said, oh, okay, I'd give you an overdraft to cover that space, but most banks don't give you overdrafts for long periods of time, right? And you have to have something to give them, like equity and other such things. Anyway, location we talked about with the restaurants. For a lot of businesses, being in the right space is pretty important. Okay. The lack of planning obviously feeds. A lot of these are related, but that one there, obviously, if you want to grow a business, it's going to take some time. We're doing a really, really condensed process of this. Over-expansion, the very act of trying to grow the business more often than not kills it. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't want to grow their business. And big part of it is they're worried that if they try to grow this business, they're actually going to kill it. They're pretty happy with what it actually is. Your dad might be in exactly that boat, Jake. He's like, I can control everything I've got here, right? But if I had to go that far out there, maybe I would lose contact with my employees. My customers would become not as important because I've got so many others. Before you know it, they don't feel as loved, and you don't want customers not feeling loved. And in this day and age, maybe you don't have dad, right? How many people do you do business with? And before you, I had to buy a mattress a few years ago. I knew where the shop was, but I was wondering whether or not it would be open, and did they have any mattresses? And I went to look these people up, and all they had was one page, which basically just said where they were and when they were open, but not a live thing, just very static. And when I went in to see them, I said to this guy, mate, how much is your floor stock? And he said, it's about $250,000. And I'm like, how do you have $250,000 worth of stock sitting on the floor here and you've got no webpage? Oh, we've got a webpage. I don't think your generation would call it a webpage. It's like a poster that's sitting online somewhere. So I'll put this one in the learning resources area. So in the, not the learning resources, sorry, in the readings, Q2 readings. There's about 4 readings in there, so check them out. None of them are long. They're all quite short. But check out this one, because this is, while it's American data, it's not that different really. When you're talking about small businesses, the contexts are not really that different, right? Mum and dad type businesses, you know, employing a couple of people, doesn't really change a huge deal around the world in Western type countries. It's when you get into the large corporations with big different laws and big different markets, that's when it's a bit harder to bring things backwards and forwards. So there's a chapter from this book, Effective Entrepreneurial Management. I chose this chapter because it is about entrepreneurial management rather than just management as such. So it's thinking about what it actually takes. So you'll find that in the readings. It's not a long chapter, and I think it's pretty easy to read really. But he starts off with this picture, and why I like this chapter is because he puts this right in the middle, right? So it would be nice for us to all think, I'm going to plan out this strategy, it's all going to be fine. But the reality is, luck is a big part of everything, right? We just can't avoid it, right? And there's good luck and bad luck, but, you know, you can be in the right place at the right time, you can inherit some money, unexpected meeting. I think if you sit down, Jake, when you go home tonight, do you still live with your dad or not? No. Okay, will we see him on the weekend? Geez, he's not very lucky, is he? Ask him, how much of his success to date would he attribute to luck? Right? Sorry? Yeah. Yep. But you still got you found the mentor. Where do you get the mentor from? Yeah, it could be luck, right? So sometimes these things just happen, but you've got to be able to take advantage of it, right? So your ability to reach out and find someone to talk to them, that's luck too, isn't it, right? Who you know, if you're smart enough, you take advantage of that luck and you make your assignment about something that you know you can put a handle on and get a bit of an inside perspective on, right? If you don't do that, then that's not unlucky, that's just silly, because I've already told you that I want to preference that when we get to the other end. But anyway, we've got the focus on strategy, the entrepreneur culture and the company, and we would love to think that we could drive all these things in a nice controlled sort of a way. but that's always not such an easy process. So they argue we've got 4 perspectives. There's the financial perspective. That is, you're going to say, okay, hey guys, we're going to grow this business on a turnover. The ultimate value of the business is going to increase. We're going to have more profits. And you'll see that associated evenly with the costs that we face as well. So maybe that's how you're going to make the case, right? Alternatively, you could have a strategic growth perspective. So now it's about how you can gain an advantage by exploiting the opportunity. So maybe in your case with the disability type services, right? Maybe you've got a supply of people coming into that space that you can reach out to, but you need to think about the opportunities that are in the marketplace, right? So as I said, maybe it's not just gardening, maybe you're going to homes, maybe you're going to other areas as well, right? So thinking about the strategic opportunities that are aligned to that existing organisation. Structural growth, so thinking about how you can actually change things within the organisation, and obviously these are not separate. Quite often it's a combination of these things you're going to be using, all right? But thinking about how you can actually change, changes related to people's roles and the way resources are actually used. So if you think back to the value chain and the value shop and the value network, they're really important, and we'll get to that in a minute, but they're very important for you guys thinking about, we're talking with the guys up here with the IT business. You may have the same set of resources, but if you can reconfigure how you use them to solve people's problems. So we're thinking, IT company, why do IT companies fail? My guess would be because they don't solve people's problems. Because it's not a retail shop, is it? It's not like I want to buy a bit of IT. You know, we buy the IT because someone tells us it's actually part of the solution to fix the problem we've got. So an IT company is successful because they're out and about and they're in the middle of everyone's problems. So that's a value shop, right? The value's being created through a value shop. So are you in that context, right? Are you trying to use the same resources but in different ways to create value? And lastly, organisational growth, so changes to the processes, culture and attitude. So that's less what we're talking about here, right? That's really about the maturation of an organisation becoming something that we're going to be proud of as such, or as opposed to a measurable thing. Michael Shaper's got this nice little triangle, which I think is cool in that it puts a nice focus on the 3 things that are really sitting in front of you. You're going to have to find the money to do what you're going to do. Some of you might be able to make the case that there's an incremental opportunity here to use the money that's coming in from additional sales to create the processes and expenditures you need for more growth. But I wouldn't think that would be that common. But in some industries that might be a possibility. There's your own aspirations. So how are we going to go from, why do we want this growth? Right? So when you, at the start of your report, you're going to talk about your business aims. Why are we going from here to now wanting to be so much bigger? All right? So there's got to be an intention that you're going to signal. It's not just because it's an assignment. I want you to sort of try and put your head in the entrepreneur's sort of space and try to ask yourself that question, because it's a little bit like saying, well, I've got 3 kids, but gee, it'd be pretty cool if I had 30. Not many people want to have 30 kids, right? No. It's a lot. And then, of course, you've got a whole range of different strategies, right? So you've got the individual, the strategies available to them, and this capacity to actually finance this process forward, all right? These are the characteristics that Hissrich identifies as being associated with fast-growing companies. The leaders have a clear vision, and I'm asking you guys at the start of your report to tell me exactly what your aims are. That there's the retention of small company traits. What do you think they mean by that? Anyone want to have a guess at that? If you walk into a little small company and you say, I bought this here last week, but, something's not quite right, versus you walk it into a large company, right? Now, they may have a return policy or whatever, but, you know, it's pretty easy to deal with someone if it's just one-to-one, yeah? They're very nimble, they can adjust themselves, whereas a large company has a policy. Oh, no, the policy says we have to blah, 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 right? So by being able to retain the traits of this nimbleness, this personalness, all those sorts of things, that can actually help you move forward. You don't want to start locking and saying, we've got a form that needs to be filled in if you want to do this and do that. It's connected to the market, so it's not just in someone's head. They've actually identified opportunities in the market. They believe in customer service because obviously that's a very positive way of getting growth. People start saying, I had a great experience with these people, or people want to use them. Shared focus across the organisation. It's very hard to grow an organisation if some people think they're going this way, other people think they're going that way. And obviously flexible sort of bought into a whole range of that. So we'll expand on these as we go, but what I want you guys to start thinking of now is you should be labelling yourself as most likely having at least one of these strategies, maybe two. But we've got these very generic strategies, right? And so you guys should be thinking, for your context, I think we're sort of there. Maybe we're a bit of a combination, but I think we're sort of there. So maybe you've got your existing products and services, nothing's changing there, and nothing's changing where you're actually doing business. You just want to get much more of it, right? So you want to get much, much deeper share of where you're actually at, yeah? Maybe you're in the same place, but you want to put new products into the market, which could be your case with the disability, right? So it's about product development or service development and actually having, if I'm mowing your lawns, maybe you're that busy I can actually clean your house as well, right? And or something in the neighbours or whatever the case may be. New market for our existing products. So now maybe I want to go from just selling in Brisbane to selling in Toowoomba and somewhere else and somewhere else. And now I want to go into new markets with new products. That's the hardest one, right? That's where people tend to come undone. But if you get it right, then you can be a company like Dunlop. So Dunlop's a very, very famous Australian company. They're not really famous in that we think about them every day, but they put tyres on our cars, they create tennis rackets, they've got Dunlop volley shoes. There's a lot of things Dunlop make, right? They're in lots of markets with lots of products, right? But it is a hard thing to do. Actions that tend to enable growth, so you would be thinking about your management team being involved in these sorts of things. You're going to need more people, right? So typically you're not going to achieve that level of growth. To double your business is not complicated, right? Most people can have a crack at that, but we're not asking you to do that with 5 to 10x, right? You increase your production capabilities so that you can produce more of whatever's coming out. You increase your access to the raw materials you need, if that's the type of business you've got. If you've got a value chain, you're turning inputs into high quality outputs. You're adding distribution channels, especially if you're wanting to get into this sort of space here, you want to get into new marketplaces. You've got additional capital that you can actually get your hands on. And that's for, you know, if you want an IPO type, go public and all sorts of stuff. I don't need you to go into that space. That's most of it going a bit more complicated than we need to think about. There's a few different methods for thinking about going global. Getting bigger. You obviously can go global, right? You can start importing and exporting things. The world's a much easier place to do that in today than it used to be. You can develop strategic alliances. So if you go down to Hobart on the wharf, there's a great business there called Muir's. And if you go to Fremantle, you'll find their sister business, Kalis Fishmongers, and they actually swap fish. So if you go to the market in Tasmania, you'll find all this beautiful Western Australian fish, and likewise you can get beautiful Tasmanian fish over in Fremantle, because their boats just meet up and they just swap stuff. They're essentially not far from each other out in the Australian Bight, where they're doing a lot of their fishing, and so they actually increase the size of their business in a whole range of different ways by just having a very simple strategic alliance. You can franchise and license. So I suspect for some of you, this would be like for the guys at the back of a restaurant. You know, it's very hard if a restaurant's turning over 400,000 or 500,000. It's very hard to work out, and it's open from lunch to 10 o'clock every day. It's very hard to work out how you could possibly, unless you become very, very expensive for drinks and everything else, how you could possibly increase. Alternatively, you could have other locations. Build-A-Bear, is that here? Yeah. Yeah. So I remember going to that in the States many years ago. It just come to Chicago. I think it started up in, not far from there, I think like in the Midwest somewhere. And that was just someone's passion. They thought, you know what, kids can come in, they can have this experience where they just get a vanilla beer and they can dress it up with all these accessories, and then at the end they'll give me $35 for a $2 beer. So, and it works, right, because people like having that experience. So that's pretty much global now. It's pretty much everywhere you go, you sort of see a Build-A-Bear sort of shop. And obviously attracting and retaining really good employees. Think about it. As you grow, you get less control, right? So if you're not in control, who is in control? So you need to have really good people who are doing the work that you used to do when you first started, who enable this thing to continue to grow. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys to have another quick chat amongst your things, amongst your groups. I know not everyone's here, but I want you to ask this question, which is about putting a stake in the ground, because at some point you're going to need to do that and just say, okay, what are we? What size are we starting at? And how are we actually going to determine the description that we're going to give you and that we're going to work from? You've got to actually have a pretty locked-in thing in terms of, okay, we're a $200,000 organisation, we do this, therefore 5 to 10x means that we're going to have this organisation looking like that. We don't know how we're going to do it yet. That's going to be the rest of the semester, but the challenge is to get from here to there. Now, I don't want this to be a moving feast. You know, that looks a bit trickier. Maybe if we made it 50,000 instead of 200,000, you know, maybe we could make that possible, right? So no one's going to fail the assignment because you haven't been able to really work out how to make this happen, right? In fact, I'm quite happy if you get to the end of it and you say, shit, we tried everything we bloody could to make this thing work, but to be honest with you, we don't know if this business is that scalable, right? And here's all the reasoning for it, right? We thought maybe we could go in that direction, but that wouldn't work because of this. And before we go, nah, that won't work because of this. And if you've got the notes in the back, which clearly show me that you've spoken to people and you kept running into dead ends, then I'm cool with that, right? Because we're close to reality, yeah? So whenever you're close to reality, I'm happy, right? When we're just sort of floating around over there, speculating and pretending, I get nervous. I find it hard to sort of stay in that space. So yeah, just have a chat for a couple of minutes, have a break if you need to have a break. Where are we? Yeah, have a quick break if you need to have a quick break. It won't be too much longer, I don't think, but if you do need to have a break, do that. Think about your turnover. Think about your scope of operations. So what type of services or products have you got out there? And think about the location of your market. Are you still thinking about it being here, if it's a Brisbane thing? Or are you thinking about the expansion likely to take in different geographical locations, be that in a state, in Australia, internationally, okay? Have a chat about those things.
This is just established, but we have more avenues to grow. Yes. So we have to use examples
No worries.
Thank you for all the help.
That's okay.
That's some stuff. I'm actually looking forward to talking to him about
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, I think that signature and like limits and things are actually a really good idea.
Yeah, he might look at it and sort of say, oh, that's not, I don't want to do that. So, no, that's all right, Dad, but I want to speculate on it. If I was running this business tomorrow and I did something like that, that's what I want your feedback. So I'm not trying to twist your arm to say.
Because he's actually done a few events and things as well.
Yeah.
Like he's done the shirts for them, and I think it would be a great opportunity to do those kinds of like limited things for those events. And he also has a stall at one of the festivals. And I was thinking if he could get contact with some of the people there, he could print them.
If he knows they're coming in advance, he already has it, and then get them to sign it with some sort of and then spray it or something.
Worth tons.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people, especially when they're stoned or pissed or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, $50, mate. No worries. Yeah,
that's a steal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries. So you guys still need to lock it in, yeah? Once you get it locked in? Yeah? Which way are you heading now?
So, we're going for a non-profit organisation.
Yep.
And we are looking at somewhere where it's like fundraising efforts on an annual basis. That has a, where you can raise around 15K. We're looking at mission growth on fundraising that, also scaling the team up to be able to afford that growth.
Okay.
So on an annual basis, maybe 3 years down, 1 year.
Yeah. Something like that, you definitely need to take it out to the 10x, right? Because you could just get, someone give you an ad on the TV and you can go from 15 to 90, right? So you really got to try and think about how you can really scale it up, and maybe go from it being something that's annual to something that's a constant. So it's not just an annual thing, because you won't have any financials, right? So you'll have all these months where there's just nothing happening, right? So think about, okay, you've got a starting point where you've got something like that. You want to expand it up so that if it's actually on the ground, you've got money coming in every month. Yeah.
Trying to figure out what the group actually wants to help with.
Yeah.
Where the money's
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely get some energy coming in if you can find the right outcome for that money. Yeah? Okay, guys. I'm going to leave these at the front. If you haven't already printed some off, just grab them. Because I want you guys to start thinking about the questions that you need to be asking yourself as you're going through the process. Because you can't just jump to assumptions and say, oh, yeah, I want to go in this direction. You're only going to know the direction by asking yourself questions, all right? Because, well, you've got a pretty ambiguous starting point for many of you. So the real challenge is being able to sort of really get underneath that and make sense of it. Okay, we are concrete in knowing what this starting point is. We sort of now know that there's an end point that we'd like to get to, but you're only going to get to that by asking lots of questions. All right? So let's move on a little bit. The pro forma statements, which I'll have for you shortly, it's just going to be a spreadsheet, and I'm going to see if I can get everything onto one sheet, but we'll see how clever I can be in making it all work in that way. But you'll report quarterly for 1 year, 2 year and 3 years, okay? You're going to have, therefore, some simplified sales projections for sales forecast, income statement, cash flow and balance sheet, but I'll put it all onto the one sheet for you, and I'll colour code it so you know what squares need things going into them, and it'll calculate stuff for you. Your assumptions about everything that you put into those colour-coded areas needs to be shared with me. All right. So if you say, oh, yeah, we're going to have this much expenditure on salaries, or this much expenditure on machinery, or our cost of goods is going to be X, Y, and Z, tell me where that comes from. All right. And tell me where you've got it from, right? So it's not just, oh, we thought that sounded all right. It makes it all balance. We don't want that, right? It might balance, but I want you to tell me why it balances, okay? You don't need to be an accountant. I've put on a chapter from Jack English into your readings. There's a general chapter there on small business accounting. It's a very simple chapter, but when I give you this, I'll run through that process and make sure you're all comfortable with that. It's more a matter of you recognising that there's going to be things going out and there's going to be things coming in. And I want you to be able to make some solid judgments about how those things balance themselves out. All right? So you can't go down a pathway of this strategy, we think this strategy is going to work if you're going broke doing it. All right? So that's a part of it. It's like a constraint that's going to be sort of constantly wrapped around you as you go through this process. I want you to come back and visit this. That's why I've got the sheets there for you. And I want you to be able to work your way through and ask yourself the questions. So you've already got a stack of questions that are sitting there. And I want you to use this to really flush out the environment. Don't start making judgments about your environment in a sort of wishful way. Well, if people did this and if people did that. The only way you can justify to me that you know your environment, and remember, this is the one that I get the most excited about, where we started the day, is this one here. Maybe if you can't convince me that you know this, then I'm losing interest. I'm not losing interest in your work, but I'm losing interest in the validity of what you're trying to tell me. So you need to be arm's reach to what you're looking at, and you need to be able to tell me when things come into this space and they succeed, they do so for what reason, right? The new variations that come in, why are they selected for, and why are other things retained? So maybe you're working in an area that's got a bit of a regulatory environment, and that's actually illegal. You've got to get a permit to do certain things in certain ways, right? So how hard it is to get that permit, right? So very, very keen for you to be able to justify this stuff as you're going through. And these questions will help you to really pull that apart, okay? Now, I don't mind if you've used other processes in other classes to do environmental scanning. I don't mind if you use those things, all right? But you still need to explain the assumptions that you're coming up with. But don't use Porter's 5 forces. Is everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, don't use that. Unfortunately, I won't go into it, but just don't use it. Okay, so your business report. This is what you're going to be doing. Okay, first, following the selection of your chosen business, so hopefully you're pretty close to this, outline the present business context in terms of both current turnover and your scope of your operations. So your starting point, all right? Tell me where you're starting, all right? So it's very clear. And that should be known to us all before you get round to actually starting to write your report, You can write the report any way you want. Don't worry about formatting and style. You just do it however you think best suits what you're doing, okay? State your intended growth aims for the business. What is it that you actually want to do, right? Now, don't fudge it. If you end up getting to the other end and you think, oh yeah, it looks like it makes sense about 7 times, let's go back and change that to say, we intend to grow the business by 7 times, right? I much prefer people being candid. Well, we've got this thing and it looks like it's about 6 times. We originally want 10 times, but we think that most probably is going to be 4 to 5 years, right, for it to logically happen. Okay? Well, you've got me, right? Because I feel like you're being honest with me, right? Discuss your evaluation of the environment of your business context. So discuss also means justify, right? So when you discuss it, every time you say, and we think this is X, Y, and Z, I would expect to see, if there's not one there, just a little 1, superscript or whatever, however you want to do it, in a bracket, a 1, and then I can go straight to the back of your notes and I can see how you explain that assumption. So every time you make a statement, a bold statement, or you put your judgment in there, put something in the back that tells me where you got it from. Now, if you haven't got anything to back it up, you can tell me you guessed, or you've based it on some sort of logic. But the more you tell me, the more believable I find the whole thing. Outline the opportunities you have identified for as suitable for growth, right? And typically there I'd expect you to actually tell me a bit of a contrast. You know, we thought about this and we thought about that, but we talked to these people and it seems like this has actually got more going for it than that. Okay? Whoops, have I gone too far? Yeah. So then, drawing on the specific growth theories covered in the unit, outline and justify the strategies you believe are best to advance the business growth. Is it a diversified strategy? Is it market penetration? Right? Using franchising, whatever the case may be. Right? So I'll continue to give you a little bit more material as we go through. And you can tell me what it is that you think best enables. Just look at them as tools. Right? You don't need to say, let's say there's 40 assignments. I would expect that you're all going to use different tools or combinations of those tools, right? So I'm not looking for you to use any specific tools. The nature of your idea, your evaluation of the environment, the opportunities that you perceive, that will determine which tools you choose to put forward and say, these are the ones that we think are going to work for us, okay? Outline the organisational requirements that need attention in order for you to enable this growth to occur. What costs are you going to face? What type of increase in people are you going to actually have in this organisation? All right. There's no magic wand, right? So how are you actually going to make this actually happen? Explain the nature of the risks associated with your pursuit of business growth, ensuring you clearly state what actions need to be taken to lessen the risks identified. Now, this is the area where I think you guys can just knock yourself out, right? There's always risk. But it's easy to just say, I think if we just tell Cole these 4 risks, I think we've covered the risk bit. You could just give me 24 risks, right? Some of them you may not be able to do anything at all about, right? Maybe there is a chance that the government could change the legislation that relates to something in this area. Unlikely, but it's a possibility. So you could just say, that's a possibility, and if it happens, there's actually nothing we can do about it, right? But at least you're telling me you acknowledge the risk. You're helping me to understand that you really are close to this space, right? If you just give me the 3 obvious risks, I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? So I wonder, did you think beyond that, right? So show me that you did think beyond that, right? Produce the pro forma statements to illustrate your understanding of the costs and benefits possible from pursuing. That's the spreadsheet that I'm going to give you, okay? So it's more a matter of you being able to populate what I've given you so it's a different explanation. Rather than a written explanation, it's a numerical explanation of what this growth looks like across 3 monthly intervals as it occurs over a 3-year period. Okay? So ensure throughout your report your collective use of your social and human capital is evidenced in your final notes at the end of the report, and that these notes are appropriately referenced throughout the body of your report. So I can't stress that enough. Okay? The notes don't have anything to do with your word count. So it's 2,000 words. So the report itself is quite snappy, right? It's not a huge thing, but the notes themselves can be as long as they have to be, all right? You might think, okay, we've given you 2,000 words that covers this process, and we've got 10 reference points here that we're going to go. So every 200 words we're saying we did this because. But you might use a 50 or you might use 100, right? It just depends on where you go with that, right? I don't have an ideal number in mind. It's more about how many times do you actually make a statement where you think, is Cole going to be thinking, did we just make that up? Yeah. Right? Yeah, you just justify when you make the statements. We believe this. We expect that, all right? Why? Why do you believe it? Why do you expect it? And that's us. Guys, any questions on that process? The actual task instructions that I said to a couple of guys, the task instructions need to be signed off as a QA process at the uni. And so that's one half of it, but the CRAs that relate to that, I'll have it early next week. It's just that the guys who would do that process aren't here at the uni because they've taken a bit of a break with the ECHA thing. So, but you'll get the rest of it there, and the spreadsheet will come. Next week, I'm going to try to get everyone to come along next week. I'll put that call out for everyone. Reason being that after next week, the classes go fortnightly. So it becomes a task-driven thing, right? So it goes fortnightly, yeah. So 6 weeks, 6, 8, 12, 10 and 12, you're out in the field, you're doing your bits and pieces, okay? So it's self-directed learning in the sense that while I'm giving you bits and pieces, and you'll have whatever the tasks are that you're out doing, right, you'll have little videos from me which will talk to you about that. And obviously, if you're stuck in any sense, you don't have to wait 2 weeks to. You can just come in and have a chat to me at any time. All right, that's not an issue. But I want you guys to have the freedom to get out there and actually find things. Don't be afraid to change your idea. If you start this process and you get to the end of week 6 and you go, shit, we actually don't know anyone we can actually reach out and touch. If you need to change your idea, change your idea. Your resource profile should be governing what you're doing here. So you want to do this, but it's not really working. You can't find anyone to really talk to in an authentic fashion. Just wind it back. Think to yourself, okay, like Jake was thinking of doing something over here, and he said, but my dad runs a screen printing business. It's like, well, that's obvious, right? You've got clean access to somebody's business context. It's not a matter of doubling their business, right? That's easy. 5 to 10x, that's tough, right? That's not easy, okay? So many of the things that his dad knows don't relate to 10x. They could relate to 2x, but they don't relate to 10x. Because if it was easy to do, you just go and do it, yeah? Any queries, questions, guys? So you've got about 4 readings or 4 things to look at in the QT readings for week 4. One's the chapter on business growth models. The other's the little overview of small business in America. I've put the chapter up that relates to the environmental interaction framework again, just in case you want to locate it. So you don't have to go and read that, but it's there, especially if you didn't do 227. And there's the chapter from Jack English on small business finances, okay? Don't get too bogged down in that. That's something that's more there as a reference. If you want to go back to it, I would mostly wait until I go through that spreadsheet with you. And then if there's something you're unsure of, we can have a chat about it then, rather than allowing yourself to get lost in it now. Other than that, guys, I think your weekend has begun. Have you got any queries, questions, just come up and have a chat. And for everyone outside, for everyone outside, hopefully that break when we were walking around talking to the groups wasn't too bad. I decided to keep it in because that way you could listen to the conversation that was actually occurring between me and the groups. I thought that might be a useful thing for you to be listening to. Yes.